I made the decision my last sort of year at uni to just completely knuckle down. I stopped going out partying with my friends. I stopped drinking. I started living like a professional athlete should live. And within a year, I saw huge improvements. I just changed my nutrition, my sleep, my recovery, things that when you're growing up, you don't really think about too much. I mean, they're the small parts of, I thought, oh, I train hard and that's all that matters. But actually, there's so many other components to being a professional elite athlete. And I started focusing on all of those little things. And within a year, I'd qualified for my first Olympic Games.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Corrigan and this is the Journey Continues podcast, where we speak to interesting individuals about how they've navigated the challenges in their lives. Our mission is not to provide advice, but it is 100% to provide insight into what our guests were thinking and feeling through these times so that you can cherry pick the information that resonates with you the most. Today's guest is Eilish McColgan, a middle distance runner, a double Olympian, and she's also represented Great Britain at the Commonwealth Games as well. So today we're going to share and explore Eilish's journey and how she's overcome some of the challenges that she's faced along the way. Eilish, welcome and thank you for being on the podcast.
No worries, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, thank you. Just settling into Colorado. The weather's much nicer after some snowstorms the last 2 weeks. So yeah, the sunshine is a welcome change.
Good stuff, good stuff. So let's get into it then. I guess, can you tell us about how the journey all started for you?
Yeah, so for me, I suppose similarly to probably a lot of athletes, at primary school, my PE teacher put me into like the local cross country race, the Angus Schools cross country county champs, and I just absolutely loved it. I think she probably put me in because my surname being a McColgan, both of my parents were athletes. And so I think it was just a natural to put me into this race and see how I went. And I just loved it. I loved being outdoors in the cold, the wet, the mud, the rain. And from there, I decided to join my local running club, which was Dundee Hockle Harriers. Tried all events. I actually started out in the javelin. I did high jump, sprint hurdles before sort of deciding that it was the longer distances that I really loved. I asked my mum if I could join the sort of older long distance group. And she said that if I stayed at the club for like 2 months or 3 months, that she would come down and she'd actually start coaching. And we haven't looked back since. To this day, my mum still coaches me. So yeah, it's been a long journey from the age of 11 or something when I first started. But something that I still love to this day.
Cool. That's awesome. Is it always something that you knew you wanted to do? You went to university, I think, and studied, and then you made the decision. So how did that happen, and what was that part of the journey like?
Yeah, I suppose running for me has always been a hobby, a passion, like something I love it. Like I love everything about it, but I never really saw the elite side of it as a possibility. I think because I was good, but I wasn't that good. Do you mean I wasn't making British teams or Scottish teams even at that point? So I suppose it was almost like it was an unrealistic aim I felt to, obviously I watched the TV, I watched the Olympics, and I would have loved to have gone to Olympic Games. But again, I didn't think it was a realistic goal for me to achieve. So I went to university, I studied maths and accountancy, mainly because I wanted to have something that was just different to my running. Do you know what I mean? It was something I love to do, but I might not always love to do it. Do you know what I mean? So I wanted to have like a backup of something else that I felt passionate about. But it was quite apparent towards my last couple of years at uni that really running was the driving force in my life and something that I really wanted to try and I suppose do better at. So I made the decision my last sort of year at uni to just completely knuckle down. I stopped going out partying with my friends. I stopped drinking. I started living like a professional athlete should live. And within a year, I saw huge improvements. I just changed my nutrition, my sleep, my recovery, things that when you're growing up, you don't really think about too much. I mean, they're the small parts of, I thought, oh, I train hard and that's all that matters. But actually, there's so many other components to being a professional elite athlete. And I started focusing on all of those little things. And within a year, I'd qualified for my first Olympic Games. So it was quite a quick turnaround from the sport being a hobby to now a realistic, this could be a career for me. So yeah, I made my first GB team when I was 20 or 21 years old, which is quite late to sort of come into the sport professionally. And yeah, I haven't looked back since. I turned professional when I was 21, and this is now my career.
So what's it like the first time you walk out with Team GB at an Olympics or Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, so London 2012 was my first senior championship, and for it to be an Olympic Games was obviously pretty incredible, but for it to be a home Olympic Games was just beyond anything I could have ever imagined or prepared for as well. I remember standing on the start line and just being petrified. Like, I was so scared. When they called my name, obviously when they called all the British athletes' names, like there was such an enormous cheer around the whole stadium that it was like a noise that that won't ever be replicated again. Do you mean it was really above and beyond anything I'd ever even heard before? I've never even gone to like a big football match or anything. So for me, this was like, it was just crazy having 80,000 British fans cheering your name. Because I was sort of thrown into the deep end, like I'd gone from like a Scottish University Championships in Grangemouth with about 5 people in the stands in the peeing down rain to the Olympic Stadium. It was a huge step up for me. And I was just scared, to be honest. I wasn't prepared mentally, physically, not at all. But I'd say that experience was the biggest and best stepping stone I've ever had into professional sport, because it was really the pinnacle at the very start of my career, and nothing has ever ramped up to that same level ever again. Do you know what I mean? Nervousness wise, I've just been able to cope a lot better. And I think the coping strategies of how to deal with nerves, with pressure, with media, everything that gets thrown at an Olympic Games, I felt I learned so much from that one experience that it was incredible.
So what was the time frame again? You know, going from 5 people in the stands to then 80,000 in the stands. What was the time frame?
It really would have been the start of 2012. We start our sort of summer season around maybe May time, April, maybe very late April, early May into June. And then by the end of June, July, you've usually qualified for the Olympic Games. So it really did happen within a couple of months. I'd gone from every race I ran, I sort of kept making improvements and getting faster. And it was just exciting to know that the Olympics was a possibility. But I had the qualifying time, but you still have to go to your British Championship and come in the top 2. I actually can't remember what month that was. It was so long ago now, but the British Championships are usually maybe 6 weeks before the Olympic Games. And that's when you find out that you have 100% qualified. So it was strange sort of racing in small competitions, and then you go to the British Champs, you qualify for the Olympic Games, and then all of a sudden that's you're heading down to London for one of the biggest races of your career.
Yeah, totally.
So it really was my first step, I'd say, into professional athletics. And as I said, it was just not something I was really prepared for.
Yeah, it must have been so surreal. I mean, it must have literally almost been dreamlike.
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, there was actually another Scottish girl, Lindsay Sharp, who we trained together as kids, and her mum and dad were both athletes as well. So we had very similar stories. But Lindsay had always been a prodigy kid. Like, she had always been winning and breaking records. And so it was really sort of written in the stars that she would become an Olympian. So it felt really surreal that we'd both done it at the same time. Like, I had come at it maybe a little bit later than Lindsay had with making GB teams and GB squads. But here we were, like, both the same age. We'd grown up together. We'd raced each other all throughout Scotland as kids. And yet we'd made it at the same time to the Olympic Games. So that in a way, it probably helped because I felt like I knew someone. Do you know, and I had someone familiar there, that like, here we were, like 2 Scottish athletes making this GB team. And I think there might have been 3 Scots in the end, or it was quite a small number of Scottish athletes who had made the Olympic Games that year. So even that in itself was like, it was really special. Do you know, I mean, it felt like we had really achieved something. We had achieved something big. And I suppose I had that bit more familiarity with them. I knew them, and it was really special to have that experience with someone that I'd grown up with. I couldn't quite believe that we'd both made the Olympic Games. It was really surreal.
And then what was like, how did the 2 experiences compare and contrast? So the first one, so it's like it's a whirlwind experience. It all happens very quickly. And I guess in some ways you're just taking it as it comes, because you don't really know what's going to happen. Or you know what's going to happen, but it's all a completely new experience. And then the second time it's, it's a bit more predictable, and therefore you're probably a bit more, it's less of an overload of information, I guess, in some ways. I guess what's that been like, and how's the experience changed, and then how do you feel you've coped differently with it?
Again, I'd say in London, because it was a home Olympics, having an Olympic Games in Great Britain was just mad. Everything about it was bigger, and probably just far bigger than any other championships I've ever been to since. So going to Rio, the Olympic Games in 2016, I just felt far more prepared and far more relaxed about it all. Yeah. Going into the stadium, there wasn't that many people in the crowd compared to what we had in London. So you almost knew how to prepare. Like, you knew that what the nerves were going to feel like, how to sort of keep control of those nerves or those anxious thoughts, and how to just be a little bit more calm about it, because you'd already been there and done it. This was no different. It was another Olympic Games, but it wasn't to the same scale, to be honest, as what London was. So I suppose I was just, a bit more mentally prepared of how to cope with that whole environment. I think in London, it was really just, this is a new experience. So performance probably wasn't top of my agenda, because I was 21 years old. I had no pressure on me. Do you know what I mean? I was just there to experience an Olympic Games, to be in a village, to be around other athletes, to see how other sports people even prepared or performed, or do you know what I mean? There was so much information thrown at you, and how to deal with media interviews was something, do you know what I mean, I'd never done before. We had to have so much media in the lead up to the Olympics. So coming into Rio, it was just so much more relaxed, because I'd been there and done it. I didn't feel like I needed to experience the village or to go and be part of the experience. I really flew in very late into Rio. I only stayed, I think I was one of the last athletes to fly in to the Olympic Games. So I'd missed the opening ceremony and all the first 10 days or so of the champs. I flew in maybe 2 days before my competition, and was in the village just 3 days, and that was it. We were really just in and out, and it was more, this is work now. Like, you're here to perform. It is the Olympic Games, but you're here to put the best performance you can do for the team, for yourself, and then you leave and you concentrate on the next goal and the next aim. So I'd say there was definitely a shift in mindset. I think after your first one, you sort of have bigger goals and bigger dreams and bigger ambitions to do better the next time. I got kicked out in the heats in London, which wasn't a surprise, because I just had no idea how to even race at that level. Do you know what I mean? It was so different. The call rooms, everything, like there's something like 3 call rooms before you race.
Wow.
And even that is entirely different, making sure that you're at call room A by 25 minutes past, and then you're in call room B at 34 minutes past, and then you get taken somewhere else, and you're not having your normal warm-up. You might be in a small room where you can't really do much. You're quite restricted, and they're checking your bibs, they're checking you've not got your phone, what watch you're wearing, just all the small little things that I'd never really been part of before. Do you mean I'd never been used to that? So you do have to adapt your routine, your warm-up, to really take in the whole Olympic schedule is just different to what I'd been used to. Whereas again, coming into Rio, you know how to prepare for that now. You know that you need to do your warm up 20 minutes before, you need to be doing your stretching at a certain time, you need to be eating this before you race because you've only got a small time frame. Or do you mean there's so many small little intricacies that you learn from that first experience. Rio, I came away with, I think I ran a PB, or I certainly made the final in Rio, and that was a really big step forward for me to come in the top 12 in the world. And now looking towards Tokyo again, I just want to take a next step. I mean, I want to try and break into that top 6 in the world and see if I can get as close as I can to some of the fastest women on the planet.
Yeah, that's awesome. How has the preparation been for Tokyo? Obviously, like the last 12 months have been pretty crazy for everyone, but you know, the Olympic calendar has been, it's always quite it's a rigid thing. It's always at the same time every 4 years, and people prepare for that moment. It's obviously been thrown out of kilter considerably over the last 12 months because of everything that's happened. How's that been?
Yeah, it has been really strange. I suppose it's been frustrating when you're putting months and more months of hard training in, or you've traveled to a training camp and you're spending months and months abroad at altitude or warm weather to try and give yourself the best opportunity of gaining a qualifying time or a qualifying position for the games. And then for that all to be cancelled, for the races to just be completely removed off the calendar. You obviously invest a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of time spent away from family, from friends. And you start to sort of, I suppose, question, God, was that a waste? Do you know what I mean, did I just waste 6 months, a year, 2 years building up for nothing? But at the same time, I think you have to take a bit of a step back and reflect on sport is such a small component of what people have gone through over the last couple of years. I mean, people have lost lives, people have lost jobs, people have lost income. So the fact that a couple of races I haven't been able to do is really small fry compared to all of that. And so, of course, from a selfish point of view, I would have loved to have had a bit more of a planned year. And races are where, of course, professional athletes make money and how they earn a living. So yeah, I would have liked to have had a full-blown athletics schedule, but realistically, it just couldn't have happened. Do you know what I mean? I think the sensible decision was made to postpone the Olympics to make sure that everyone felt safe, that the world had, I suppose they were hoping it was going to return to normal. Unfortunately, it's not quite returned maybe as quick as they were hoping. But I am confident. I think the Olympics will go ahead this year. I think it will be entirely different to any Olympics we've ever been to before, which is a shame. I don't think it will be quite the Olympic Games that everyone dreams of, that hope. I think if it was my first Olympics, I think I'd be pretty disappointed. But yeah, I think if it goes ahead, that's still a really positive movement for sport, heading in the right direction again. But I do think it will be no spectators and maybe a little bit quieter to what we're used to. But yeah, the goal still remains the same. I'd love to still make the team. I think the challenges to try and find races has been really difficult. And I think a lot of athletes will struggle with that. There'll be some athletes who just haven't been able to find the races. I've been very fortunate that I found a last minute race just last month over in California. After race cancellations, time and time again, we made the decision to fly over something like 17 hours from Dubai over to LA. And it was so last minute. I had no idea of how the competition would go, but I ran a huge PB. I ran just maybe outside of 30 seconds under the qualifying time for the Olympics. So it's put me in a really good position for qualifying, but there's still a few more boxes to be ticked to make sure that I'm on the plane for Tokyo. So yeah, I think it's difficult. I think athletes have faced a lot of challenges with regards to qualification, how they find the races. Distance races in general are very few and far between, and even more so now with the pandemic. And travel restrictions between countries has obviously been really difficult to try and navigate. It's not as simple as just, oh, there's a race in France, let's just travel to France and race, because then you have to put in 10 days quarantine when you return from certain red countries, or you have to go via a different country to be able to, or spend 10 days somewhere else before you can get into another country. So it really hasn't been straightforward, but we've done our best. Like, we've done everything we can to ensure that my little team, as in my mum, my boyfriend, my dad, and myself, we've done everything, and my race agent Caroline, who's brilliant. We've done everything we can to try and give myself the best opportunity to keep training with facilities that are open, wherever they may be, and continue having some sort of top quality races to make sure I have the times needed for the summer.
Yeah. And do you think, with change comes opportunity? So I guess with there being quite turbulent, I guess there might be opportunities there that might not have been there before. Is that something that excites you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of athletes who will struggle, but I think there's also a lot of athletes who will flourish with the pressure and the demands and the change and the adaptability and having to be flexible. Do you mean it is tough, because there are going to be the athletes who just can't cope with that. But at the same time, I think you will find athletes who will just make it happen. And I suppose that's what makes you a top flight professional sports person. Do you mean you find a way to get done what you need to get done, and if you want to achieve something, it might not be the straight road A to B, but you'll get there somehow. So yeah, I think race organisers are really trying their best to give us race opportunities, whether that be in little COVID secure bubbles. So the race numbers might be really reduced. You sort of are stuck in the one hotel when you travel to a competition. You're obviously tested before you fly, when you arrive, during the competition, and then you really are stuck in your hotel room. You travel maybe to the track and back again, and that's really it. And so they are trying ways to make sure that we do have those opportunities. And if anything, it's just taught me that you have to take the opportunities that come. It doesn't matter if you're prepared or not prepared. I mean, you jump at the chance. And so I think that last race I did in California was a bit of a risk, traveling all that way with the jet lag and just not being too sure of how it would go. But at the same time, I didn't want to sit and see the results come through on my phone and think, oh, what if? So I think it is about grasping the opportunities that do arise and just making the most of it when you can.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned your team and you mentioned your mum and dad in there as well. What's it like having parents who were obviously very good at what they did? Was there extra pressure in that, or was that ever something that you thought of?
Yeah, weird. I obviously get asked this all the time, but it's never been, I've never personally felt pressured into the sport or pressured to become an Olympic athlete or anything like that. Like, I feel like my mum and dad were both really good at just keeping what they did separate to what I did, if you know what I mean. They never forced me to watch their competitions or I don't even really remember ever watching them race. The only reason I've seen them race is because journalists from newspapers, when I was about maybe 15 or 16, they came down to the house and they sat me down and were like, watch this YouTube video, this is your mum running when she won the world champs, what do you think? How does it make you feel? And that was the first time I'd ever seen it, and it actually felt a bit surreal looking at it, because I was like, oh, that's my mum. It was really, really weird. And I think I've always been very naive to perhaps the level that my parents competed at, because growing up, I just assumed that everyone's parents went for a run. Do you know what I mean? I just felt like everyone's parents were fit and active, and it wasn't until I got to high school that I realized that this was a job for them. Do you know what I mean? This was actually a little bit different. And I think then when I started to take my own steps into the sport, I had a greater appreciation of, okay, they're professional athletes. They're not just doing this as a hobby. This is a job. And I know how difficult it is to be the fastest kid in your county, never mind being a world champion. Do you mean it sort of started to blow my mind a little bit as to how good an athlete my mum was, because growing up I just had no idea. My mum was never showcasing her races or her medals or her trophies or anything like that. She always had it quite hidden away, and she wanted to make sure that when I came into the sport, I did it for me. Do you know what I mean? I did it because I enjoyed doing it. So I think in that sense, I never had a pressure on me whatsoever. I remember one story when I was a kid. I was under 13, so I must have only been 11 or 12 years old. It was like one of my first cross-country races in Scotland. I might have been Falkirk maybe. And I can't remember what position I was, but I maybe was second or third. And I was over the moon because I had won like my first ever little like Scottish medal. I was well chuffed. And this woman came up to her kid and was like hugging her kid saying, "Oh, you did it. You beat McColgan." And at like the age of like 11, 12, I didn't understand it. Like I couldn't, I didn't get why this was like such a big achievement. I don't think she'd won the race. Yeah, maybe I hadn't even won a medal. Maybe I was third or fourth or fifth, but I remember this girl had beat me and that was the achievement. It wasn't winning the race or it wasn't winning a medal. It was the fact she had beat McColgan that was her mum was like over the moon with. And it was really strange because to me, that was like alien. I didn't get it. I didn't really understand it. And obviously looking back now, I understand it was the name and it was who my mum was. But yeah, I've never felt that sort of there's been external pressure from people, but I've never felt that sort of internal pressure. I think I've always felt like me and my mum were two separate individuals. We're very different. And maybe because she was my coach as well, I always felt like she was a really integral part of me running. So when I cross the line and I run a PB or I run well, I think it's not just me, it's me and my mum. Do you know what I mean? It's the two of us doing that. We're achieving it together. And I feel she feels that as well. Like when I break my mum's records, people will say like, "Oh, is your mum angry that you broke her records?" And she's never like that. Like she's actually the opposite. She wants me to go faster because she knows that we're a team. Do you know what I mean? We are a real team effort. We're a team unit. And we have been since I started this sport at 10, 11, 12.
That's good. That's the way it should be. I think when we previously spoke, you mentioned I'm not sure if it was the race recently in California or one prior. But I think you were either close to one of your mum's times, or maybe just beat it or something like that. What was the...
Yeah, so I just missed it by a second, which I was obviously gutted to run 25 laps of a track, 10,000 meters, and just be 1 second outside. I was really gutted, but I mean, it's given me a lot of confidence because my mum's times were obviously were fast. They were all Scottish records at some point or another. The 10K is still the Scottish record. My mum had the 5K. But I broke my mum's PBs over 1,500, 3,000. I took her Scottish record over 5,000. So all the shorter events I had sort of like ticked off. And the last remaining ones were her 10K, her half marathon and her marathon. And I've never done a half before. I've never done a marathon before. So the next one really was the 10K. But for me, that's always been the sort of outstanding one. Like I've always just felt like that was far out with my reach. I never thought I'd be capable of running what she had. And 2 years ago I ran 31:16, and that was the first time I thought, actually I could maybe break 31 minutes here. You know, I'm only 16 seconds outside and my mum's ran 30:57, so just a smidge under. And I thought that's the first time it's given me a little bit of a confidence boost to think, do you know what, I think I can do it. I think I can get there. So yeah, to travel all that way to California, have the most perfect race, and just be outside it, I was gutted. But at the same time, to break 31 minutes is a really big barrier in just the sport in general. There's not a huge amount of women that have broke 31 minutes, certainly in European level. I think I went to maybe 5th on the all-time UK list. But a lot of those women you have Paula Radcliffe, which is like, she's ran something absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. And then you have Jo Pavey, Julia Bleedsdale, that have ran maybe 50, low 50s, 30:52, 30:55, something like that. Then you have my mum, 30:57, and then you have me, 30:58. So we're all quite close succession. So really for me, the next goal would be to try and sort of leapfrog some of those next women on the list. And again, it's really sort of inspirational because I remember watching Jo Pavey and Julia Bleedsdale ran those times at the Olympic Games in London. So my first Olympic Games, when I went, I shared a room with Julia Blaisdell, and to me, Jo Pavey was like a hero as well. So I watched those women run their 30, 50, whatever they ran. So yeah, it feels pretty amazing now to think that I have the opportunity to maybe try and run as fast as that. Because I never, back then, as a 3,000 meter steeplechaser, I never would have believed that I'd be here now running a 10K.
Yeah, because I guess when you start to be around these people and you get to know them, what they've done becomes more attainable. You know, I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that it goes back to even like my first sort of GB team. I remember just being around, people like Jo Pavey and thinking, God, I used to watch obviously Jo on the TV. And even there was like a team maybe before that, I got picked as like a reserve. So I didn't actually get picked for the team, but I went as like a traveling reserve. And this was just before the Olympics. And I remember there was Jenny Meadows on that team. And just being around these elite athletes and seeing just how they prepared, like how every part of their day was really focused on performance. And I was coming in it just as a student and thinking, oh, but I train hard at my Caird Park in Dundee, and that's all it takes. And that was the first time it was a real eye-opener, being around professional athletes and seeing actually it's not just training hard, like it's their sleep, it's recovery, it's what they're putting into their body recovery wise for nutrition. It's stretching, it's foam rolling, it's communication with their coach, it's ice baths. Do you know what I mean? There's so much more to it than just going for a run or training hard. That's really probably the easy part. Do you know what I mean? There's so many of these little 1%, and it wasn't really till I went on this sort of team as a traveling reserve, and then certainly into the London Olympics, that it just gave me real insight into what it does take. And from there on, I was so determined to, I suppose, just change my lifestyle a little bit and actually start becoming a professional athlete than just playing at it. Do you know what I mean? And that really was a big step forward for me.
That's really cool. I always find when I think about in a business context, I remember meeting Richard Branson, and anytime I've met anyone who I've seen as being famous or I've looked up to, when I've met them, when I've met them in real life, they've almost seemed like a caricature of themselves, like just a more extreme version of like, oh, it's not like, oh, there's Richard Branson. It's like, oh, there's Richard Branson. It's like, it's quite impactful. It's quite funny. So you've been to two Olympics, two Commonwealth Games.
Yeah.
That's like, those are obviously amazing achievements. What would you say have been the biggest achievements in your career? And I guess what biggest achievements and the biggest challenges as well?
I'd say my biggest achievement, it's difficult. I have two. I think coming back from, I suppose it was probably the biggest challenge as well, would be coming back from injury. In 2011, so just before I went to the Olympic Games in London, I suffered a really bad fracture in my foot. So I had to undergo surgery, and they put 5 screws and a metal plate into my left foot. The surgeon actually said to me that I wouldn't compete at like a high level. He said I could go for a jog and things, but I wouldn't be able to be elite. Mm-hmm. And at the time, like, that was devastating. Like, I cried and cried and cried. And this was just a local, a doctor in the hospital in Dundee. And he didn't know that I had dreams and ambitions of becoming an Olympic athlete. He just saw this young girl with a broken foot, and he didn't realize he had just like shattered my future essentially. But it made me so determined to just try, and I was so far from making the Olympic Games in 2011. But if anything, I feel like the injury was like a blessing in disguise, because I worked so much harder than I've ever worked in my life to try and get to that Olympic Games. I set that was the goal. I wanted to do it. And I did everything I could. When I was in the gym, I was in the swimming pool, aqua jogging. So I used to go down to the local pool and just run around in circles, and people just thought I was absolutely bonkers. But I had a big like moon boot on, a big cast, but I still would jump in the pool with it on and just do everything I could to try and get fit. I then was on the cross trainer for months on end before finally getting back running. So definitely overcoming that and making London was something that I'm really proud of, because I put so much effort into it and actually achieved the goal that I had. When a lot of people probably thought I wouldn't have been able to do it. And similarly, I went through another ankle break this time in 2015, again, the year before Rio. And I felt like I'd found myself in the same situation again. Do you mean, here I was a year before the games on crutches and in a moon boot with another 2 screws put into my left foot. But I somehow managed to again battle back to make the Olympic team in Rio, to make the final and to go on to run PBs that year. So I'd say those are definitely the 2 biggest challenges that I've overcome. And something that I'm really proud of actually is being able to make the Olympic Games coming from those circumstances. But I think for like a personal performance point of view, I'd say winning a medal at the European Outdoor Championships in Berlin in 2018 was a real sort of step forward moment for me, because it's the first race I've gone into with sort of a clean slate of no serious injuries, no illnesses, no little colds, bugs, nothing. Like I went into that race knowing that I was in really good shape and that I had a possibility of winning a medal. And I set out with intent from like the first lap. I just went to the front and I led pretty much most of the race. And I came away with a silver medal in the end. We actually broke Sifan Hassan from the Netherlands, won it in a championship record. And I think I had actually ran under the previous championship record as well. So to do that at the Europeans in the Berlin Stadium, which is like one of the most historic, incredible Olympic stadiums as well, that for me is really one of the highest moments of my career so far, and something that I'll always remember, look back on, and actually just be proud of, something that I achieved. So yeah, I'd say those 2 moments are probably different, I suppose, coming from different aspects. I mean, one's sort of overcoming challenges and achieving to be an Olympian, but at the same time, I think from a medal and purely performance point of view, my silver in Berlin is definitely something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's funny because I find that I've had not similar, but I guess contextually similar things happen within business. And I think sometimes when something bad happens, like a broken bone or a setback or whatever, in a sense, because it gives you less, you have a goal and this thing happens, in a sense, because you have less options at that point, you've just got no choice but to focus on your goal. Yeah. And actually it makes things simpler and clearer. And then you move, instead of moving forward 10 miles an hour, you move forward 50 miles an hour, because you're just that much more focused on where you want to be. It brings clarity of thought, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I definitely see that. When I look back now, obviously at the time you're like devastated, but actually when I look back now, every sort of setback that I have had has definitely made me a stronger individual, both physically, because I've worked on areas then that have perhaps been weaknesses that I maybe wouldn't have bothered looking at before, but secondly, just mentally as well, going through that whole process of whatever setback is, whether it's coming back from a surgery, the recovery side of things, like being able to rationalize all those thoughts and put them into, how do I make this work? Do you know what I mean? What is the end goal and how do I get there? Because it's not as simple as just going from point A to point B. There's so much other stuff that comes in between that. But as you said, it does make things a lot clearer. Do you know what I mean? You have that final goal, you know how you're going to get there. It definitely made me, just more focused, more motivated, more determined to reach that end goal. I wasn't willing to not achieve it. Do you know what I mean? I felt like everything that I did, all the energy was put into trying to get there. And to be honest, it was never about proving other people wrong or anything like that. It was almost just proving to myself that I was right to continue in the sport as well, because there's been a few times with these surgeries where I could have probably thought, maybe this isn't for me. And there has been times where that's crossed my mind, where I thought, is my body just not robust enough? Is it not strong enough? Is this sport maybe not for me? Do you know what I mean? Is there something else that I could potentially be good at that I haven't tried? Do you know what I mean? Everyone's good at something. Maybe this just isn't my thing. But I think probably one of the best things that came out of it is just proving to myself that I was right to continue. Do you know what I mean? I was right to make some sacrifices along the way, to really put the effort in to get that, to reach that end goal. So yeah, I'm glad I stuck at it and didn't quit. I think that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of as well, is not stopping when it got tough.
Yeah, no regrets.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that leads on to my next question. And, there's obviously a lot, but, what has training and what has, I guess, the COVID experience as well, what's all this, your entire career, the COVID experience, what's all that taught you? What are the kind of the 2 or 3 things? And then what are you going to take forward?
I definitely see it's taught me to be a lot more flexible. Normally in the past, like, we would have competitions that are set in stone. This one's happening on X date, Y date, Z date, and you prepare and build into those. But I suppose, like I said earlier, it's almost being a bit more flexible with your training and knowing that if an opportunity does come up last minute, to take it, to not let it go by. Because you never know when that next opportunity might pop up again. Do you know what I mean? It might be several months, it might be a year down the line. So it's definitely taught me to just be a little bit more adaptable. And it's been difficult. Of course, we spent a lot of time away from family and friends. I mean, I normally spend several months away anyway, but even more so this year. And even with a little bit of uncertainty of, I suppose, their safety, is everyone okay at home? I suppose you feel a little bit of a responsibility of, I'm trying to continue doing my job, but at the same time, in the back of your mind, you're hoping that your family, your friends, everyone's okay at home. So there's, I suppose, a greater need to maybe communicate with family and friends, to ensure that, I think from the sort of mental health point of view and just general well-being, I think I've made a bit more of a conscious effort to try and stay in touch with my family. We're the type of family where we could probably be away for months on end and like nothing changes, and then we'll obviously see each other and it's all cool. But now we've got like obviously a family group on there to make sure that we are keeping in touch a little bit more, because my mum's in Qatar, I'm obviously in America just now. I've got 2 brothers at Glasgow Uni. I've got a sister still in Carnoustie at school. My other brother's at Stirling Uni. We're all a bit all over the place. So it's nice to sort of try and keep in touch with them as much as we can. And I think that's been a sort of, to be honest, another motivating factor for me as well, is knowing that even though I'm really lucky to continue doing what I'm doing, to train, to race without, to be honest, a huge amount of disruption. I've been very, very fortunate. But it's certainly a motivating factor as well to me to keep doing that, to keep working hard, because I know that all my family are at home supporting me, and that they're watching my every move, probably through social media rather than anything else. But I think that's probably been one of the best things to come out of it as well, is just that communication is really key, not just from my family, even between me and my mum as a coach and athlete. I think it's definitely drawn us a lot closer.
That's really cool. I think a lot of people have found that over the last year, where we've not been able to see people in the same way, and we've not been able to move about as flexibly as we could have done. Although hopefully, and there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel now, but it's definitely about appreciating those experiences and time with family, and communicate. I mean, I talk with my family more often than I've ever done in a long time. So I think that's definitely a common theme for everyone.
Yeah, I think so. I can't wait to see my family. I don't know when I'll next see them, to be honest, but it's usually, to be honest, it is usually quite limited anyway. It's usually maybe Christmas and maybe one time in the summer, but yeah, we've gone a long time now without. I can't wait to get up to Forfar actually, to see my wee granny as well. I've got 2 little grannies still. One's in Forfar and one's in Ireland, so I have no idea when I'll next get home. But yeah, it is, to be honest, it is a real driving factor and motivating factor to make sure that the months that I do spend away from them all are worth it. Do you know what I mean? It's been, I want to make sure that at the end of the year, I can go, they're proud of me. I know that they've supported me every step of the way, and that I've done it not just for me, but for them as well. So yeah, I can't wait to see everyone.
That's awesome. Love that. And then I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but obviously the Olympics is a big focus for you. Is that the sole focus? Are you thinking about what you might do after that? Maybe take a holiday if you're going to travel by that point?
Yeah, obviously sole focus is the Olympic Games. We never really plan too far in advance anyway, to be honest, because although that's the main goal, there's always competitions afterwards as well. So this year I'd really like to do my first ever half marathon. So the Olympics is obviously top priority, but after that's over, I will continue training in the hope of finding a good sort of fast half marathon going ahead. I'd love to do something like the Great North Run. That was cancelled last year, but hopefully that gets the go ahead this year. I know there's the Great Scottish Run in Glasgow as well. It's another half marathon. So there are a few events that I'd really like to target after the Olympics. And then at the very, very end of season, I'm not sure when that will be. It depends on obviously the other road races, but we definitely like to go away somewhere we usually have 2 weeks off every year. And we try our best to like tick off somewhere that we've never been before. I love to travel. Like I love to explore different destinations and different countries, cultures, different cuisines. Like I love it all. So I'm not sure where would be. Tokyo is actually on pretty much high up on my list anyway. So if it means if I make the Olympic Games, I'll definitely take 1 or 2 days at the end of the champs to just be a bit of a tourist and see the sights of Tokyo if I can. But yeah, certainly we'll have some travel plans towards the end of the year. I'd love to go somewhere like Uganda as well. Gorilla trekking is like really high up on my list. So yeah, I have a huge list. Honestly, I'd be like 100 before we start ticking it all off. But it'll be really nice to just travel for leisure, to do something, to visit somewhere that we've always wanted to visit. At the moment, we're obviously fortunate. We have still been able to travel, but it has just been purely for training camps and races and things like that. So it'll be really nice to have 2-week downtime at the end of the year, whenever that may be. And fingers crossed, the world will be a little bit more open by then.
Awesome. Well, that is a lovely way to end the podcast, especially on a Friday. This is good. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Eilish. We really appreciate it. This has been an awesome conversation. So thank you.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me.
Everyone who's watching, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and hit that bell. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please subscribe and follow. All of the links to where you can find Eilish will be below the video on YouTube and linked on Apple and Spotify as well. We have lots more guests like Eilish coming on the podcast and lots more content like this. So lots more great stuff coming. But in the meantime, please take care and we'll speak to you soon.